All right, very good. So we're still on item number 5, which is the industrial hemp registration fee structure that Michelle laid out. And we'll go back to comments on that if anyone had time during lunch to discuss it. Wondering if anyone on the board had any other questions or comments about the fee structure and how we may best move forward. And maybe someone would like to reiterate what they said. Otherwise, I will.
I don't think I can reiterate what we were, basically was the flat fee increase. I'm back to the point that you brought up. How soon do we have to make this decision? How soon does this additional funding have to be decided? I mean, do we need to do it? Do we need to do it today to get things done timely as at the board level?
Ideally, yeah. I mean, as we've discussed before, it takes a lot of time to get through these processes, and you have to build a lot of kind of, buffer in there to try and make sure that we are implementing things on a timely basis. So, if we continue, if we push kick the can down the road, in all likelihood, I doubt the board would meet again before probably January with the holidays coming up. So it would put us potentially another couple months down the road, starting the process later.
I was just talking to Juan, and he said that we're using money from the cotton.
From other programs. So yeah, we're borrowing money, right. We're borrowing money from other ag-funded programs.
Okay. I don't have anything to say. If we have to make the decision today, we do, but I say we be very, keep it low. I mean, not go backwards like you were suggesting, but let's keep it low, the increase.
All right, I had a quick question. The entire process of it, since we've already gone through it before and we're just changing the amount, do you think it would just changing the amount is going to be a quicker process if all the language is the same?
Theoretically, yes. Again, I mean, most of the things that we've been dealing with this board seem like they are going to be simple implementations and simple fixes, but we never know. So, regardless, we would have, it's through regular rulemaking. So regardless of what happens, you have a 45-day public comment period, so that takes up a month and a half, and then you have a approximately 6-week review at the Office of Administrative Law, so that's another month and a half. So there's 3 months of just basic built-in process in addition to whatever has to happen at CDFA, whether that's creating the initial package or responding to comments, implementing things. So there's quite a bit of time just built into the process as it stands. But yeah, I mean, theoretically, yes, it's taking what was presented previously and updating the numbers. But as we've experienced, nothing ever really seems to go to plan, so we want to be prepared.
And that would also, like, for example, we raised it a little bit today, and then the next time we met, we realized it wasn't enough. The whole process starts over again, correct? All right, so I think we have to take a lot of this, or all of this into consideration of what we want to do today, whether we can kick the can down the road a little bit and see what the fees may be. Possibly we'd have a little more information after starting in 2020, but once again, that's going to be 2 months from now, and that would make it more in the red. So, kind of knowing the situation, anyone have any other comment? I think we're all hesitant to want to actually raise any fees. Does anyone have any other comments on it?
I would just say, looking at the 18-19 actuals, of those that we do have actuals on, the current fee brought in $238,500 for 18-19 actual, and basically the county agreement's expense was $244,000, so that's about a wash. And then you look at personal services, operating expenses, equipment, that was about $238,000, and so doubling the fee would basically just barely cover actuals. And so, I think we should do something today to at least bump it up a little bit, but I think the only thing we should do is just change the flat fee for now until we have more data, and not go to an extreme. But, you know, so that way we keep people in the game, but we know that we're not even covering the basics right now of what needs to happen. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you, David. Anyone else want to comment on that?
How much would the $300 increase raise for the next year, the estimated acreage and fees?
So if we estimated that we would probably have about 850 registrants for this year, but we also have to take into account that there's about approximately, I think, 300 people have already registered. So, and then also the timing it takes us to have this in place, we actually, you know, people will be registering in the meantime. So when I suspect that we'll have this effective come April 30th or somewhere around there, so that when people are renewing, they're paying the new fees, and we estimate about 250 renewals.
Yeah, so Michelle was estimating about 850 total registrants on average per year. So 850, if you increase the fee at $300 across the board, during that year, it would mean another $25,500 in revenue. Yeah.
No other comments? Go ahead, Dave.
That doesn't, it helps, but not enough to even,
Right. All right.
I think we should explore the possible small tax on the sales of the crop, possibly. See if there's some sort of way we can do it that way.
Yeah, I think it's a nice idea, but I don't think that's in the law. I don't think we would have the authority to tax sales. Am I right?
Well, it wouldn't necessarily be a tax, but it'd be
Assessment.
it is a tax, but not.
Yeah, so, and to clarify, I apologize, I put $30 instead of $300, so it would be $250,000, which is better. No, so, and as far as that's something we would have to investigate further on whether or not we have the appropriate statutory authority to implement an assessment. Our guess is that we probably could implement an assessment if we knew what we were assessing, but we would have to be very clear as far as what is getting assessed and to who. And so, I mean, we would, you know, that's certainly more complicated. We would have to investigate whether or not we actually have that kind of flexibility under the law, but then we'd also have to be very clear on what is it that we're actually assessing. At what point does that assessment collected, and on what products and what amounts and things like that. So, I mean, again, it's, you know, I personally think it's a good idea. But, you know, you just have to be very clear on what it would actually look like. So, I mean, if you have suggestions on that, you know, we're open to hearing them.
Yeah, I would also think that if we were to have an assessment on sales, that would also probably require more people hired by the CDFA to be able to follow up with that.
Potentially, not necessarily. I mean, we do collect assessments, and as Tom is well aware, as a cotton grower, there are a number of different assessments that we collect. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, there is some follow-up on that, but it's not usually too complicated. There is a possibility to need to do the occasional audit of growers. You know, we've done that in the past. I mean, it can get complicated, but in the end, no. I mean, I personally don't see a huge additional cost to CDFA. It's just more of a whether or not we have, it would maybe change how we look at the application and the fees. But in the end, it's more about how can we, you know, fairly, equitably, and reasonably implement it and make sure that it's very clear.
All right, well, we were talking about just basically doing something today to make the system not, at least help the system a little bit, so we have a little bit of more money coming in. We were talking about $300 would raise, you said 270,000?
250, and I think Josh had another comment here before you get too far.
Yeah, I think some sort of tiered system where, you know, you have, say it's, if you have gross sales of 500,000 or 1 million or 10 million, you know, go up like that. I don't know, that's how I would probably structure the assessment.
All right, anyone else want to comment about that? So I just, that worries me, because then certainly people could easily, you know, sell their material and claim something a lot lower, if they wanted.
Yeah, I mean, just to be, I mean, so again, again, Tom knows, we've got a number of different assessments that are implemented. It always ends up being complicated for a number of reasons, and one of them is that you also have to, you know, most commodities that do an assessment also account for vertically integrated companies. So that way if there's not actually a sale occurring, they're still paying their fair share because they're benefiting from the program. They're still costing money. So I mean, there are a lot of things to take into consideration. I don't know if you feel like you have something that you're comfortable with proposing today, that'd be fine. But I mean, it may also be something you might want to kind of investigate further and think about what it would look like and talk about as an industry.
Yeah, I think we need to know exactly, you know, how much we need to recuperate, and then we could make that assessment. Try to figure out, you know, how many acres there are, and then what that assessment would look like. I don't know. Yeah, it wouldn't be something you could just throw out a number today. Yeah.
All right, well, if we aren't going to throw out a number that we mentioned. All right, we talked about 300. That would bring in, you thought about 250,000. We did $350. That would bring us to kind of closer to option 3, where they had the new registration of $1,250. That might be a little bit better to begin with. It certainly would not necessarily cover it all, but it would certainly would not put the industry so far in the red moving forward if we were to do that. So I'm kind of thinking that maybe if we were to raise it today, we just do it by a flat fee of $350 to help out, and then be able to assess it a little bit later. We might be able to know after the first of the year, possibly in our next meeting, if that number is going to work or not. Anyone else want to comment on that? Yeah.
Question for Josh, CDFA. So if we were to come up with a number of, say, $300, throw a number out there, and you would, CDFA would submit the regulation proposal. As far as a statement for reason, we came up with a number. Don't we need justification how we came up with a number?
Yeah, I mean, it's based off of what we anticipate our cost being and what we're able to. So we probably have to adjust what we're actually projecting spending, because that's where that's coming from, right? I mean, you know, it's a flat fee based off of projections from spending. So
if we were to come up with 300, or we would, you're going to adjust that, but showing we're still running in the red.
pretty much, yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know how else we would be able to justify it other than show that will help cut into figures based off of fairly similar projections. That's one of the things, that's why we're putting the projections out there for comment as well, is if you guys disagree with the projections and feel like those are off, whether it's our projected acreage, projected number of registrants, what the amount of money that we're spending on the county level, we would appreciate comments on that as well. But I do kind of want to just put it out there, just because I know a number of board members and members of the public have brought up concerns with trying to make sure that the fees themselves are equitable and that the cost is being spread out so that way the smaller farmers aren't being disproportionately affected by them. So I don't know if any of the board members want to speak to that about, the proposal to continue to maintain a flat across the board fee, and whether you would be interested in adding any type of an adjustment to that. Kind of looking, I know Matt and Tom both have spoken to that.
I would say, if the flat fee is at this level, $1,200 or something, I'm totally fine with that. I think it actually will encourage diversity in farming practices, because at that level, someone can try growing fiber and seed, which is that they're not going to do if they're paying $50 an acre. So I actually think if we're going to keep the fees low, a flat fee will sort of perhaps encourage diversity in farming, which would be interesting to see if it works.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Anyone else want to comment? No? All right, anyone want to make a motion that we make, was it 300 or 350?
Well, so we had a motion from Richard, who's not here, for 300, that was seconded by Van. Did Richard leave, or is he coming back?
He left for the
He
day.
left for the day, okay. So with Richard being absent, I guess maybe we can table his motion and take a new one? That's the best option there, because I don't know the other way around that one. So maybe we'll table his motion and put out there for a new motion.
All right, do we have a motion for raise the fee $300?
Or whatever you choose, since it's a new motion.
I'll make the motion that we raise it $300 and then come back, as soon as we can with, hopefully some more detailed data and take a look at it again.
All right, somebody want to second the motion?
Sure, I'll second that.
Okay, so we have a second by Van. All right, I guess we'll take a vote for that from the board.
So we'll want to open it to public comment first.
Well,
but-
before.
So to be
okay.
clear, so the motion is the recommendation of the secretary that we raise the registration and renewal fee from the current level of $900 to $1,200
Correct.
per-
All right,
per
before we
registrant per
vote,
county.
we'd like to have a discussion from the board or anyone in the public.
Justin Eve with Seven Generations Producers. We're farmers here in Sutter County. I just had a quick question. What was the number of projected registrants for next year?
It was a total of 850.
So, and this year, how many were there?
So this year would have been the same, a total, yeah, let me pull it up. So a total of 600 plus 250. So a total of 850.
So we only think it's going to double next year?
With our projections, we're saying that it would be 850 each year.
Less than doubling? Or, yeah. My opinion on that is that I think you guys are going to be inundated with registrants next year. I would probably bet you're going to be closer to 1,500 to 2,000 next year. I mean, we did go from 0 to 35,000 acres in 1 year, and it's just starting. So, $1,000, $1,200, you're going to probably see $1 million+ easily next year from registrants. So just keep that in mind. That I think that's highly or drastically underestimated about how many registrants we're going to have next year. So if we're trying to make up for those costs, let's keep that in mind. That this is first year only, and we've seen other states like Oregon and Colorado and. I mean, how many registrants did Colorado have this year? 50,000? Just keep that in mind. Thank you.
Yeah. And to be clear, so it looks like it's, if you add up the first two columns there, 550 total registrants so far in 2019. And they're projecting 800 a year moving forward. So thank you for your comment.
All right, anyone else from the public or the board want to comment on raising the fee $300? No?
I still just don't think we have sufficient data to do it at this meeting, but that's my opinion.
Well, I think the motion was to raise it 300 and then at the next meeting, check and see what the numbers are. I guess we could certainly lower it or raise it at the following meeting. It's just, we would get the ball rolling now to do it.
Yeah, correct, because it's going to take 4 months. If we get the ball rolling now, but we come back in January, February, and we see in those meetings something different, then we can, make an
Right.
adjustment if we so choose. But just based on the basic numbers that we have, and we're going to miss, obviously 4 months of registrants next year. So
Right.
we're really only looking at about 8 months of registrants next year, if everything goes as planned.
All right, very good. Any other comments from the board or from the audience? No? Okay, we're ready to take a vote. All in favor of raising the fee $300 plus making sure at next meeting we do another comparison or look at the numbers, say aye. 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 All right, anyone opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And anyone abstaining?
I abstain.
Okay, so that makes, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 in favor, 1 opposed, and 1 abstain. So I believe the motion passes. All right, very good, guys. Let's see where we're at here. All right, so we basically went through, we're on number 6, which is additional public comments. So is there anything else, anyone in the audience, any other topic that they would like to talk about or ask the board at this time?
Correct. And just for a reminder for the public, so I mean, this would be an opportunity to bring up topics that the reason we have it now is to have it ahead of the discussion of next agenda items, so that way the board knows kind of what's on the public's mind. And then I know, George Bianchini, you had a letter that you handed out. Did you want to come up real quick and?
Oh, yeah.
Sorry to make you keep walking there.
Medical issue.
Oh.
My knee's broken in 3 spots. I'm not even supposed to be here. So the letter I sent out just had to do with an experience that we had at a testing on Thursday, the 30th. And while everything was pleasant, and this is not here, I'm not here complaining, but there seems to be a little discourse. The inspector, which was the assistant or associate commissioner in Santa Cruz, explained that during their weekly telephone conferences with the Department of Agriculture that she was told that they're just to take the top flower off the top, and they're not to take the 18 inches off the top. The 18 inches just comes off the bottom. And so, you know, rather than to cause any problems there, we had them note that on the test. But I knew automatically that that test was going to fail if you just take the top flower. And so I guess I was looking for some clarification. I think I pretty much know the answers, but this is going to be a process now. This grow, I'm only at 5% of this grow. The farmer's standing to lose a substantial amount of money if it gets turned underneath because of protocols and who's understanding what the rule is. And so what I'd like to find out from the board is, are the federal guidelines in effect now? I was told by the county that they became effective Thursday the 30th, 2019. That was the day we had our harvest. Yet in the California rules, I know that it has to be submitted by March, and then we might even have some time afterwards. And so I'm just trying to find out now how I should handle this. If there is, and then maybe Rick, maybe this goes to you, do you know who handles or is there a weekly or some sort of like training session for agricultural commissioners so that, you know, they're all, so that they understand the written rule?
There is a regular meeting, I don't know if it occurs weekly, by CDFA for agricultural commissioners or their staff that have questions to report anomalies that happen out in the field. Regarding the question as far as direction on how a county would proceed, in my county, I would take my advice from my county council and proceed the method that my county council directed me to proceed.
Okay, so it can go county by county then? Yeah. So it's not, so the state, it's county by county, so our state rules really, is that just a guideline or a suggestion?
So, hopefully you can hear me. So, I mean, the state regulation is the regulation, and that's what's expected to be followed. However, we are in communication with USDA regarding the implementation and application of the new federal rule. Unfortunately, I can't answer your question right now on when it becomes effective and how best to apply it. We're hoping to get that information soon from USDA. We've reached out, and we should have conversations in the very near future. And so hopefully we'll be able to answer that question. In the meantime, we can reach out to Santa Cruz County to work directly with the deputy and have a conversation with them on the proper implementation. And then, as Rick mentioned, we do have regular meetings with all the commissioners regarding their questions on proper implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
All right, that plays a little bit into what probably should be on our next meeting agenda, and that's federal law update and how that's going to affect the state law.
Yeah, I basically understand how the law works. The letter went out, I'm here asking, and then we go the next step. So, thank you.
All right, next.
So I'm Davina Smith. I'm a deputy county counsel from Solano County. And I was asked to come here and spend 3 minutes letting the board know about Solano County's experiences with hemp. We are an ag county. We wanted to, our intention was to treat hemp as any other ag product. You know, we don't tell our walnut growers what kind to grow or how to grow. We let the farmer decide what's the best way to do that in compliance with sort of state and local laws. Our registration process went pretty straightforward. We registered about 400 acres over 9 fields. We've done our testing. All the testing so far has come out well. I think we're still waiting for one test result, and they've all been in compliance. We had a couple samples that were lost in transit through the courier companies sort of somehow misplaced it, so that was sort of an interesting issue. And we had to go out and retest for those. But what happened on approximately September 20th between then and now is there's been an explosion in calls to law enforcement around these fields. And these calls have been from the registrants themselves, from security companies hired by the registrants, and neighbors. And these calls relate to thefts of the plants. And in fact, in one area, in one field, our ag commissioner staff was out testing with the registrant, and the registrant got a call on his radio that the security was in another part of the field chasing off thieves during the middle of the day. We've got lots and lots of calls for suspicious vehicles, neighbors reporting people all dressed in black at night running through their property to get to hemp fields, cars filled with hemp kind of going down the road after they've been stealing from the crop. There's also actually been violence. There was one neighbor who photographed thieves that were taking plants off the property, and these thieves took a gun and actually shot at that neighbor. There have been, one security guard tried to confront a thief, and the thief pulled a gun out and shot in the air. The security guards, unfortunately, have been a little overzealous sometimes. They have been sort of tearing down our SID canal roads, kind of spooking animals and livestock and other people in the area. There was one situation where security went on foot through the fields to try to get somebody, came back to find their security vehicle was on fire. Someone had lit it on fire. Neighbors have reported that they hear a lot of gunshots in the night, and they have basically stopped reporting them because law enforcement comes out and there was a gunshot 20 minutes ago, what can you do? So there have also been issues with the security companies that the growers have been contracting with to try to mitigate this problem of the thefts. We had one grower tell us that he had paid over $200,000 in cash for security for his fields. And then, of course, we've gotten also complaints from neighbors saying that these security folks are blocking public roads with their cars to prevent people from accessing the fields. They're spotlighting neighbors, telling neighbors they can't, ride their horses in the area. And then, of course, neighbors are also reporting seeing people approaching security guards, and sort of there's an exchange going on, and then these people go onto the fields, and presumably I think what the neighbors think is that they're paying off the security guard to go and take what they want, whatever. I don't know what happens. So we have a community that is sort of up in arms, and we've got neighbors saying that they don't walk their dogs or go to feed their horses without carrying guns. We have security guards who have guns, and we have thieves who have guns. This sort of have all come to a head, and yesterday my county decided that they were going to implement a 45-day moratorium on all new registrants, as well as any cultivation of hemp in our county. We're going to allow the folks who currently have crops still in the ground or are processing it through to finish that. But I think that there's concern that someone's going to get seriously hurt or killed. So I don't come to you with any judgment that hemp is bad or good or otherwise. We see it as an ag commodity. We hope that it would be treated as such. We were all a little stunned and surprised that this has happened. We feel bad for the registrants who abided by the rules and tried to grow their product. We feel bad for the neighbors who just want to enjoy, their property, right, and do their own farming activities and not feel threatened when they go out to feed their horses at 4:30 in the morning. So I don't have any, advice or we don't have any, information beyond what I can tell you. We're going to be looking at what we can do. If we can do anything, we may just end up being a county that doesn't allow this or put so many restrictions that no one wants to do it. And I think that's really unfortunate because I know our county was interested in this. Our ag community was actually interested. Our ag advisory committee had been either indifferent, members had been either indifferent or hopeful and excited about this potential for a high value crop that people could farm alongside other things or transition over. And then as of yesterday, we have a letter from our Farm Bureau supporting a moratorium. So it's a kind of a sad to see how things have flipped and I think it's, as I said, I have no answers. I just wanted to come and inform you, and I know my county wanted me to come and do that. So thank you for the time.
Thank you.
Justin Eve with 7 Generations Producers. We're out of Sutter County. This would be the moment when we propose some agenda items for the next meeting. Great.
Yes.
And just to address that last comment about the thieves, we've heard a lot about it as well. If you have a bank, you have a security guard. If you're going to grow a high-value crop, put a fence around it, put lights up. I mean, we see this all the time, in high-value crops, thieves, They put up fences or security. So, I mean, it's definitely an issue. I think there's some confusion, but I think hopefully the subside in the coming years. But in any case, for the agenda items, I would suggest putting on there about the sampling and testing protocols that George has addressed. We've already identified the fact that in the law it states that samples must include stock, which have been left out of the actual regulation. We're interested also, so that would be one item, sampling and testing, to make sure that our law is in line with the regulation. That would be one item. Another item would be around destruction or remediation. The state has weighed in on that, but there hasn't been a definition like BCC has, how if you do have a crop that has tainted with pesticides or whatever, then there is a possibility for remediation versus just flat out destruction. If you have 1,000 acres of hemp and you go to destroy it, not only is the company probably going to go out of business, but then the sheriff or the county ag commissioner's got to deal with that. So it would be great to put on there more discussion about destruction and remediation if that's a possibility. So that'd be another agenda item. Obviously, this talk about CDFA and law being in line with the new USDA regulations. Another point, I would like to see the state take a stance on THC. I think that pretty much everyone in the room and probably watching would agree that anything less than 1%, as we've already identified it as a state, is not marijuana, nor were they trying to deem it as marijuana. So maybe California taking a stance with the USDA saying 1% is hemp. Anything over that, yeah. But less than that, this 0.5, 0.3, from my understanding, where that originally came from was some Canadian research 20 years ago. So maybe California takes a stance on THC and says this is what we believe is deemed hemp or not. So that would be another agenda item to talk about. In addition to that, the stance on CACASA, and maybe Rick, you could speak to that, or I know that there's someone in charge of the ag commissioners. Maybe we could get that person in the room to have a conversation about how maybe they'll make it easier from county by county and farmers that maybe farm in multiple counties to have some type of standard or practices or procedures around testing and protocols and regulations. So I'm not sure, Rick, if there's someone that we could actually speak to for the overall board.
The person in charge of each individual agricultural commissioner is their board of supervisors. Okay. So we don't have anybody in charge of all ag commissioners. It's you answer to your county board of supervisors.
And for the group of agriculture commissioners for California, that would be one organization. There's an organization of agriculture.
Correct, and we have a chief executive officer that we give direction to, but she's not in charge of us.
And what is her name?
Sandy Ellis.
Okay, great. So maybe talking to Sandy and maybe talking to Rick and maybe just seeing if there's some way we can help these guys come up to some sort of standard from the state, saying this is what we'd like to see implemented across the board. And then my last agenda item that I think needs to be addressed at the next meeting would be around our current program and how that's going to be implemented in the future. We had a pilot program, and there was some discussion about that. And there's some discussion about this new law that's coming. So I'm personally confused as a farmer with a permit of like, what program are we in? Are we in a full-blown program? Is this a pilot program? Are we waiting for the USDA to tell us what to do? You know, so just not sure, because I from my understanding and the comments and the information that I've been seeing from the CDFA, it kind of sounds like we're waiting for the USDA to tell us what to do. And California's always led the way in agriculture, so why don't we tell the USDA what our stance is, and this is what we believe as an organization, and this is the program that we're going to implement, whether you like it or not, USDA, this is the road that we're traveling. So I'd like to see something from the CDFA, an agenda item talking about our specific program and the stance that we're going to take addressing, like I said, THC and any of these other issues, because it seems right now it's like a hurry up and wait situation, and I think we need to be a lot more proactive from a CDFA or from a regulatory standpoint as far as dictating to the USDA how we feel we're going to approach that in our 35,000 acres that we grew this year, how we'd like to see that regulated. So I think that was maybe 5 or 6 different agenda items. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. It's a little bit difficult. It's like playing a game where the rules keep changing. You know, since our last meeting, we had that law passed we talked about today, SB 153. That changed the rules a bit. Also, since then, the federal regulations came out. And I do believe that as much as we would like to lead the way, I think the state departments of agriculture have to follow the federal departments of agriculture. Would I be correct? I mean, I don't believe we're allowed to go against that.
Yeah, I mean, it just kind of depends on who occupies the field on what topics. So, yeah, generally it depends on what you're talking about. But yeah, for the most part, USDA sets the rules on the things that they occupy the field for, and when they don't, then it's up to the states to set their own rules. And so that varies from situation to situation, crop to crop. But as I mentioned earlier, that's something that we're exploring as far as how that applies to hemp in particular and to this new federal rule. And again, I think we're about to talk about it, right? What happens if CDFA doesn't have an approved plan, or any other state doesn't have an approved plan? What happens then? We don't know. So that's the information we're trying to gather.
Yeah. So maybe on the agenda, it would be whatever our state plan is. I know that Oregon has submitted a state plan, and Colorado, and a few other states have submitted a state plan. So maybe as an agenda item, creating a subcommittee, or at least having as an agenda item, what is our state plan for submission in May? Because May is 6 months from now.
Yeah. So to be clear, our state plan is a compilation of our laws and regulations. So it's whatever we have on the books when we submit it, plus like a cover letter and some other minor stuff. But it's our laws and regulations.
So
But yeah, we can provide a review of that and a discussion on what that looks like at the next meeting.
Perfect. Thank you,
Yep,
Josh.
thanks.
Appreciate it, Board.
All right, anyone else have a comment or an agenda item they'd like to see at the next meeting? Nope. Okay, well, it looks like, are you going to say something?
Yeah, if we're done with the public comment. The last one I'd like to request is just to circle back on the actual hemp pilot program. I think we had a subcommittee for that at one point. There's definitely been like a lack of, academic support, I feel, in the state, at many levels. And there's certain topics which we need to, continue to pursue at a more qualitative level. So looking at things like, odor and odor complaints, pollen cross-contamination, and then like regional varietal development, I think would be really key for the industry. So if we can kind of just keep that conversation going, happy to, work with, I think Josh was the other member of that task force, to, prepare a short kind of PowerPoint for the next time if we want that on the agenda. Thanks.
All right, any other agenda items anyone would like to see?
Lawrence, if I
Yeah.
can, I forget who, but somebody brought up about the harvest acres earlier, and I made a couple notes, and based on public comments, I think if it's possible to include another couple of categories, it'd be nice to know if acres had to be destroyed, so destruction acres. And then also if there's any crime issues along with someone's crop.
You're referring reporting.
Yeah, on the
Reporting.
reporting side of it after the fact, yeah. So, you know, I know there was a request on how many acres were actually harvested, and maybe what the harvest was, but I think it would be nice to have destruction, you know, if crop had to be destroyed, and then any crime issues, you know, even if it's just a yes or a no on the crime issue, at least then it gives us an idea overall on each grow if there were crime issues with it. And then the only other thing that I had was, I do think there needs to be harvest clarification. It's confusing, you know, from the time that the sample has to be done, the time the ag commissioner has to go out to do the sample, and what's considered the harvest window. I know there's a draft out there that kind of gives ag commissioners an idea, but I don't know that that has been shared with all the farmers. And so it seems, you know, I'm not a farmer, so I have no idea, but just based on all the comments we're hearing, it would be nice if there was, you know, from sample date, you have until, you know, a certain time frame to actually harvest. So I don't know if that's possible or not, but I just think the discussion needs to be had with some ideas on what an actual harvest window is.
Right. Correct me if I'm wrong, Josh or Michelle. We're currently operating under emergency rules, and we're waiting for the actual rules to come out, correct?
So as far as the state regulations, so we have an emergency regulation that's currently in effect, and then we recently published a proposed permanent rule. And so that's currently available for public comment. The public comment period, I believe, is open for another month or so. So people have comments on the new proposed rule, they can make them. And so that would be proposed to take effect in the future. And then, of course, we're, like everyone else, looking at the federal rule to see if we have to or need to make any changes to that. But yeah, so currently we're working under the emergency regulation that was adopted. And we've proposed a permanent rulemaking that makes some minor changes to that.
And do you know in that either the emergency rules or the proposed rules, if that answered some of Mr. Robinson's questions about the time between testing and harvest?
Yeah, I don't know. We would have to take a look at what's in there.
Okay.
But that's a good suggestion and something we need to look into. And obviously not just looking into it from California law, California regulation perspective, but also federal, what the interpretation or the intent is there, or what it actually says. Because, yeah, it's a huge concern.
I think it's going from 30 days to 15 days.
Right.
Is the harvest window now?
Correct.
If I
Yeah, the
remember
question
right.
is whether that's in relation to the start or the end, or what all that part means, and what the actual window looks like, what the actual time frame looks like. So if somebody wants to collect samples and have the results in time to complete harvest by a certain date, when do they need to start that process?
It may take the
a good
lab
question.
a week, or
Right.
then do you have only 8 days left to harvest 1,000 acres, or?
Yeah. So yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Larry, this great list of agenda items here, this springtime's coming. Last year, a lot of growers had disasters because they had to plant so late because there wasn't no guidance or no ability to plant. What do we need to do where a farmer can plant? And these are all issues that came up largely because of the first year problems that we see. So we're going to meet, you said probably in when?
We're
Because
thinking
I guess if
January.
we went, what would we need to do, and when would we need to meet to get this through the process that has to happen so that the farmer can have that information and counties by March?
Well, I think Josh mentioned the emergency rules are in effect now, and they are on the webpage, correct?
Right. Yeah, and so, and the permanent rule is also on the webpage and is currently posted. So, I mean, if there were no changes, then it would likely be in effect before then. The question mark is if there are further changes, or what the implementation of federal regulations, how that impacts things. Yeah, I mean, as far as further action from the board, I guess that would depend on federal regulations and implementation there.
We probably should not make any recommendations until we have that discussion about federal rules on it. So I think to answer your question, or to answer any farmer's question, would be to look at the webpage and take that as what the current rule is right now. For it. All right, any other comments from anyone on the board? All right, you kind of make a list of what we're going to talk about. Yeah, on the next meeting, if you can kind of read that, Michelle.
Read it? Okay, so we have, starting with, do you want me to start with the public comments?
Yeah, well, I was looking at federal regulations, that's a given.
So George Bianchini brought up sampling testing guidelines. Davina Smith from Solano talked about, an increase in law enforcement calls. Justin Eve talked about sampling testing protocols, destruction remediation. He requested that the state took a stand on and give the interpretation of the THC. He requested for CACASA, I guess, a discussion from CACASA on their standards for sampling testing. We have pilot program, and then MAT pilot program to discuss, I guess, research on odor, pollen drift, varietal development. And then Dave Robinson spoke about having crop destruction law enforcement activities reported back to the board, and a harvest clarification. Did I miss anything? Okay.
All right, well, it seems like, the first thing is to look at the federal law. Second thing would be then to look at our emergency and pending regulations and to see how they compare to the federal law, if we would need to make any changes or were required. But that would probably cover things like testing and sample protocol, things like that have already been covered, that's already written in the law.
Right. So, I mean, it sounds like in the big time-sensitive issue, because most of these are informational discussion, there's not necessarily a whole lot of regulation involved. The biggest time-sensitive one would be federal regulation, which I believe is open for comment through the end of December. Is that correct, Michelle? I don't know if the board would like to or needs to meet during that comment period to discuss further. And again, we're still trying to get information from USDA on what that whole process looks like, but if the board would like to meet during that time frame, that's something you would need to we would need to start scheduling that now. So I guess that's the question out there is, does the board feel the need to meet to discuss that within the next 2 months? Otherwise, everything else we can discuss and move forward with. I mean, there's probably a few things that require regulation, but nothing that's as time sensitive as needing to get done before January.
All right, any other comments? I don't know if it's really possible for us to meet in December. And then what will we do? We would, how to make a recommendation to the federal government. That's not quite what we do. We only recommend to the state government. So probably I would imagine January, maybe 2 months from now to meet again. Will probably if there's any changes to the federal government, it will happen at that time. And then we can also discuss how the federal laws will affect our laws and if we need to make changes. So I would recommend that we meet sometime in January.
Early January, I think.
Early? Okay. I'm okay. It's basically when you have the room. I mean, everyone else on the board is okay 2 months from now? All right. And it would be when the room was available, correct?
Yeah, so as with the past, Michelle or probably Shadi will send out a list of available dates, probably for the first couple weeks of January, and then whichever date works for the most board members, we'll get everything reserved and get it scheduled.
All right, so we'll have it sometime in January. I think we're all done for the meeting. Is there anything else anyone wants to mention?
Yeah, I have one more thing. I'd propose that we get 2 people to work on that, the assessment, or not the assessment, or whatever the change is. Yeah, the registration fee. we have something to present next meeting.
All right, well, we agreed to raise it, the fee by a certain amount. If you want, I guess, Josh, if you would like to look into that and have a report for us on how you feel that might work, some sort of assessment fee, if you would like to be tasked with doing that.
Sure, I'd work with somebody
So-
on it.
Alongside that, I mean, we'll want to try to get a clarification on what our authority is, so we can report back on that as well, what kind of flexibility we have on setting that type of an assessment. But yeah, whoever you feel would be best to further investigate and report back on what would be assessed and what that could possibly look like. And our staff are certainly available to help sort through some of that, but if there's someone that wants to work on that, that'd be great.
All right, well, I know
Josh.
Josh has agreed. I don't know if anyone else would like to work on that. I don't think it's necessarily a two-person job. You want to do it, Van?
Well, I'd be happy to join, but only after Josh told us we could actually do it. So once we get assurance from you that that's possible, then I think it's a good idea. I mean, I like it, so I'd be happy to work on it, but I'd wait till we get sort of clearance that this is something within our scope of sort of power.
All right,
Yeah,
so-
well, and if it's not, then you might want to have a conversation with, if it's something that you're still interested in pursuing and pursuing a legislative change, I know there are people in the room who have access and are interested in doing those types of things too, so. But yeah, we can report that back to Josh and Van. We'll start that process and get it going.
All right, so you'll be in contact with the Department of Agriculture or employees
Yeah,
there,
yeah, I can do that.
Josh?
And then also the pilot program thing, we could represent that presentation we did months and months ago. Maybe update it a little bit as well.
All right, now the pilot program, is that something that's also comes out through regulations from the CDFA, is that correct?
Sure. Yeah, that'd probably be best if Matt and Josh want to reach out and have a conversation with Michelle and the team, and then you guys can talk about what it was you presented and where you want to move forward there. Yeah,
All
that'd be a
right.
good idea.
Very good. All right, other than that, looks like anything else? Or we're all done? All right, meeting is adjourned at 2:32 p.m. Thank you, everyone.